Sheila Gunn Reid for Rebel News, and I'm here in Calgary, Alberta for the Canada Strong and Free Conference. It's a networking conference for Conservatives, for prominent Conservatives, but also for the regular Conservative activist. This conference asked the question, what is the West's place in Canada? We heard from some prominent Western Conservatives like Alberta Premier Daniel Smith, Convoy lawyer Keith Wilson, but we also heard from an Eastern Conservative, Jamil Jivani. He is a rising star in the Conservative Party of Canada. He's an advocate for religious freedom, particularly for Christians in the public square. He's spoken out against crime, and he's concerned about the ability of young Canadians to get jobs. Oh, and he is a critic of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Take a listen to our conversation.
This is less of an ideological problem and more of a what is the point of politics problem. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. I don't think Doug Ford or the people in his administration believe they have an ideology. I don't believe they have come to a rational conclusion that there's a better way to be a conservative than what I or you would say. In fact, I'm not even sure they would be capable of having a conversation about conservative ideas or principles. What I think is more of the issue is there are people who think the goal of politics is to have power and maintain power for as long as possible at whatever cost is required to pay. And there are people who want to do politics because they believe in certain values or ideas or changes that they would like to create. And to me, that is the difference in Ontario between a lot of the people who are, who are our candidates and myself. I don't want to speak for other people. So I'll say that's the difference between me and the difference between Doug Ford. It's weird when you talk to someone, as you might if you spend time with people in the current incarnation of Ford Nation, and they think that because someone put a good poll out for them, that you're supposed to be happy. Like, oh, you got a good poll. I guess that's good. And not to diminish the fact that that's a reality of our business, like we need to get public support. But if you're popular, but you're not doing good things, why am I supposed to be happy about that? Yes. And to be perfectly honest, I also question, whether the negative effect of that is producing more cynicism among our people. Right? If people think politicians don't believe in anything and they're not going to do anything, and regardless of what color your jersey is, you're going to have the same approach to big, important issues, then you're making a lot of people feel like politics isn't even worth getting involved in the first place. You're making a lot of people feel like making the time to vote is not worth it in the first place. And that is my biggest concern among anything as it relates to Doug Ford, is that is what he's doing to our people in Ontario, and ventures to do to our people across the nation, I think, if he had his way. So that is what bothers me. And why I was so amped up on election night is because for weeks and weeks, I had been seeing volunteers putting their effort in to trying to help win this federal election. Kids who've never voted before, single moms making time after her shift to come and knock on doors, people who are giving everything they had. And when they would open up their phones and see stories of the so-called Conservative Premier of Ontario trashing what we were doing, they felt discouraged. And they deserve someone to speak up for them and tell this guy, I don't care about how, about your theatrics and your stunts. I don't respect you, and I'm gonna point it out because I don't like what you're doing to the people who are trying to fight for a better country. That was the point I had to make.
Jamil Jivani, I wanted to ask you about the proposed study that you have at the Heritage Committee to study the attacks on places of worship, not just Christian ones, but you do point out that some 100+ churches have been vandalized or burned over recent years, but also Christian musicians, peaceful Christian musicians, have been cancelled, and Liberal MPs have played a role in that. And the Heritage Minister, who oversees Parks Canada, has sort of been absent on the file, given that one of these concerts was supposed to go forward at a Parks Canada location. Is there a potential to see the Parks Canada Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, called in part of this study, and just your general comments?
Yeah, well, certainly I would love to have Minister Guilbeault speak to our committee about this issue, and certainly the Conservative Shadow Minister, Rachel Thomas, I'm sure will weigh in on that also. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to a lot of Canadians have seen over the course of years now a series of attacks on Christian institutions and churches, crimes being committed, and then being left to wonder, well, why isn't there any law enforcement? Why is there no follow-up on who did this? And why are there so many examples where it doesn't seem like anybody's trying to figure out what's going on or how we can prevent it from happening again? So, you know, the one of my colleagues, Mark Dalton, had introduced some legislation last year that if the Liberals had, agreed to, would have increased the penalty for arson against churches. Of course, the Liberals didn't want to support it, didn't go anywhere. Now we're in a position where it continues to happen. More and more Christians feel like they're being persecuted against and being pushed out of the public square, as if being a Christian is something you have to be, hide, you can't be open about it, which is ridiculous, right? So I think what's happening is that we're trying to put forward things that will force a conversation, and most importantly, force government officials to acknowledge this is a problem and actually be held accountable to doing something about it. There's so many problems where they're very quick to virtue signal and take action. This is not one, and I'll leave it for others to speculate as to why they are not concerned about Christians being attacked, but they should be. And, I think it's our job to stand up for that.
I think some people thought, Justin Trudeau is gone. Mark Carney's a different guy. Maybe we'll see a change in the tone of the government and how they treat Christians in the public square. I mean, one of the first things Justin Trudeau did was use the Canada Summer Jobs grants to exclude Christian and pro-life organizations. Well, organizations that didn't explicitly sign an attestation to the Liberal Party values, really. And I think right out of the gate, we have seen a continuation of the Liberal attacks on Christians just by, Liberal MPs calling for a Christian musician to be canceled.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark Carney is trying to present himself as something different from the last decade. And I think time is on our side in making the case that that's not true. You gave some great examples of issues where he's approaching it the exact same way Trudeau has, unwilling to stand up for, basic religious freedom and freedom of expression. And I think the economy will tell a similar story, that over time people will see Mark Carney's not that different from Justin Trudeau. And we really do need a meaningful change. It's not just about changing one guy who's the leader of the party. This party as a whole has some real ideological problems. And there's a lot of problems in our country they have been unable to solve. And we need new blood, new faces, new ideas to move our country forward. I think Mark Carney's not the right guy for the job. I said that before he got elected. I say it now. And with Pierre Poilievre coming back to the House on September 15th, I think the contrast is going to be even clearer, that if you want something new, if you're not happy with the status quo, Pierre's the guy. It's not Mark Carney.
Yeah, Mark Carney is Trudeau without any of the charisma that Trudeau used to get by. Now, I want to talk to you about something that's happening in Ontario, even though this is a Western-focused conference. There's a real crime wave happening in the GTA, and for an outsider looking in, it just seems like like almost a war zone. And, while we sort of hope that the federal government takes the crime wave seriously, there are things that Doug Ford could be doing other than complaining, while it's his prosecutors who are bringing charges against homeowners who are defending themselves.
Innocent man got his doors kicked in the middle of the night. 4 people went in there. His 3 kids are there. His wife had a gun to one of the kids. He went to go protect him. And these scumbags shot him right in front of his kids. Shot him dead twice. Just imagine, what the trauma these kids are going to go through for the rest of their lives. This is where society's gone, folks. They're defending themselves now. If you have a gun and you're a hunter and someone's coming into your house to kill your family, they're gonna defend their family, and they should be exempt. Go to root cause. It's not them coming into the house. It's ridiculous. You know something? I have a saying for the folks that are defending their homes. I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And unfortunately, my friend Aleem is going to be carried by 6 because he's trying to defend his family. It's a disaster right now in the justice system, and I'm going to be all over the federal government, just all over them. It's disgusting.
For example, in Alberta, we really haven't seen anybody charged with defending themselves since prior to 2021. We had a guy in Red Deer shoot an intruder in his home, and the cops said, clean kill.
Premier, I wanted to get your reaction to a incident, I believe, in Lindsay, Ontario, where a man is now facing criminal charges for defending himself from a home intruder. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, if you don't want to get shot or beaten up, don't break into people's houses. It's pretty straightforward. We had a similar incident in Alberta where somebody defended themselves, and they determined that there was not a reasonable likelihood of conviction, because we do expect that people are going to use a reasonable use of force to defend themselves and their families, and I support that.
What are some of the solutions you'd like to see from the Premier in Ontario to deal with the crime in the meantime?
Well, I mean, certainly not prosecuting people for defending themselves and their homes would be a great start. I think, Pierre, Poilievre, and Larry Brock have put forward some ideas on how we could make the right to self-defense, more to strengthen it in Canadian law, giving people a better position should there be in a situation like this to be able to demonstrate that they did not do anything wrong. So that's what I would like to see. I mean, the reality is that Doug Ford has thus far done a masterful job of convincing people he's not responsible for any problems in Ontario.
Yeah, I hope he finds the guy in charge.
Yeah, I mean, 7 years isn't enough, apparently. I don't know how long he's got to be there before he can start actually solving any problems, but he's done a great job of convincing people that nothing's his fault. And then ironically, where he, maybe hopes people blame the federal government for things, also being buddies with the federal Liberal Party, right? So I don't know why he thinks he can continue to get away with this. I think Ontarians are going to start demanding some action and some answers. And I look forward to seeing him held accountable for what he's done and what he's not done.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoy our coverage at events just like this, please consider making a donation at rebelfieldreports.com.